Finance Committee to order for our budget hearings. And Mr. Evans, would you give our invocation for us, please?
The Heavenly Father, we thank you for this day. We thank you for an opportunity to come together, Lord, and take care of the business of the Cherokee people. I ask, Father, that you would bless each home represented here. Bless the tribal council and the administration, Lord, as they undertake the awesome responsibility of overseeing the physical matters of the Cherokee Nation. Thank you for your Son who died on the cross for our sins. I ask you to continue to be with us and protect us as we do. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Next we'll have roll call, please.
Jack Baker.
Here.
Tara Fallon Watts. Bill England.
Here.
Bill John Baker.
Here.
Harley Buzzard.
Here.
Julia Coates. Bradley Cobb. Joe Crittenden.
Here.
Jody Fishinghawk. Here. Meredith Fraley. Janelle Fulbright. Don Garvin. Chuck Hoskin Jr. Tina Glory Jordan.
Present.
Curtis Snell.
Here.
Chris Self. David Thornton.
Here.
We do have a quorum.
Yeah, thank you. On our budget hearings, first we'll hear from Callie Kester, who will give us an overview of the overall budget for the administration. She's our treasurer of the Cherokee Nation.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Before we get started, I would like to introduce Jack Farmer. He is the new group leader for Management Resources. I think he's gone around and tried to meet each of you, but I just wanted to introduce him and let him tell you a little bit about himself. You want to come on up, Jack?
Oh, sure.
Well, most of you I've met, some I haven't, but I'm glad to be here. I grew up in Adair County as a youngster, and Adair County. And I moved to, my father was a disabled veteran, and we needed to get near medical facilities, so we moved closer to medical facilities, so I moved across the line, so that in Arkansas, which is kind of an extension, I guess, of the nation sometimes, I think. But I come from a family of 8. We're all Cherokee citizens. I graduated from the University of Arkansas. It was a bachelor's and a master's degree. Went to work for the Bureau of Indian Affairs in Toyah, Arizona. Left Toyah, Arizona, and went to work for municipalities. Been in both the public and the private sector for about 25 years. I've done project development and design and construction, and I'm happy to be here, and I'm really glad. I'm enthusiastic about the direction that the council is going, and also the visionary policies and procedures and the future that our principal chief is taking the nation. So I'm glad to be here. Thank you.
Thank you. Good to have you, Mr. Farmer.
Was he the group leader?
Yes, I'm the group leader for Management Resources.
Thank you.
Glad to have you with us. Thank you.
Thank you, Jack. Okay, I'm pleased to present the Principal Chief's proposed 2009 budget. It's been my privilege. This is my 7th budget to present to this council, and just want to go through a brief overview. And I've already messed up. Okay, Doug. How do I get rid of that? There we go. These are the budgets that we are presenting this year. One of the changes we have for 09 is we have split some of the boards and commissions out into their own group. In previous years, we had one big group called Boards and Commissions. This year, when we were looking at it, I decided it made more sense to present those separately, like Gaming Commission, Tax Commission, Environmental Protection Commission. Those are all very diverse organizations with different funding sources. So that and the Election Commission you'll see as a separate group this year. Other boards and commissions, what remains in there is primarily the Arkansas Riverbed Authority and the Employee Appeals Board. Okay. I'm not very good at driving this, apparently. As in previous years, when we in the administration get ready to prepare for a new budget cycle, we focus on the Declaration of Design Purpose, the vision and mission statement. Go ahead, Doug. Basically, we focus on communities, jobs, and language. The Strategic Budget Committee has been around for a few years now and reviews all discretionary funding requests. This year, in preparing for FY09, we expanded that somewhat and added strategic work teams. These were 3 groups where we pulled employees from across the nation, from across all job functions to get a good representation. And each of these groups was tasked with coming up with goals and a plan for the short term and the long term, focused on communities, jobs, and language. Those groups are continuing to meet, and in fact tomorrow we'll be presenting some long-term goals to the service team. But those groups had a real impact on this budget cycle in terms of helping to identify where there were some obstacles, where there was need for additional resources. And again, the Strategic Budget Committee's role is to review the discretionary funds to make sure, as much as possible, those are aligned with the initiatives of communities, jobs, and language. Go ahead. On the revenue, we have quite a few changes in 2009. First major change is IHS funding for Hastings. When you look at the revenue projections in the budget, you will see about a $33 million increase in IHS funding. That is primarily related to Hastings. Most of our other grants and compacts are relatively flat. There may be some carryover in some of those grants and compacts, but the new funding is relatively flat. Health third-party revenues are projected at $51 million for 2009, which is a very large increase from where we were. $34 million of that is related to Hastings. On our discretionary revenues, dividends are budgeted at $39 million. That's based on the C&E's projection, which they provided back in May or June, of $130 million in net income. Tobacco taxes. When we put together the projection on tobacco taxes, they are down approximately $1.7 million from the 08 budget, and that is primarily because of the surtax and wholesale tax. Now, what we have found just in the last month is we've gotten a bigger payment from the state than we expected on the rebate. So we may have some opportunity to increase our projections on tobacco tax as we go into 09. There's still a lot of uncertainty surrounding that because of we don't have the compact signed. So we were fairly conservative when we did the revenue projection for tobacco taxes. Motor vehicle taxes, they're relatively flat with 2008. I think we're projecting a slight increase. And motor fuel tax revenue, we estimate that based on the previous 4 quarters actual. These next few slides I put together to show you some trends in terms of our discretionary revenues. As I mentioned, tobacco taxes, which this chart includes sales tax and alcohol tax, all of the tax commissions collections excluding motor vehicle tax. Going back to 2003, it was fairly small. Then you get into 5, 6, and 7, we had some large increases with the surtax and the wholesaler's tax. Then with the events that have transpired since then, we've reduced the 08 budget. It's a little over half what we actually collected in 07, and then we had projected to decrease even more for 09. As I said earlier, there is probably some potential for additional revenue there. It's just a real uncertainty right now. On our motor fuel tax revenue, that has been very steady. This shows you from 2003 actual through 2007 actual. You notice there's a little bit of a blip there in 2005. In 2005, we were able to collect an additional $1 million, which was funds that the state had held in escrow when we first entered into the motor fuels tax, and they released that escrow in 2005. So that's when we got the nice little increase, but then it went back down, and it's been averaging $7.5 million for the last several years. Yeah. Next is motor vehicle tax revenue. Again, you can see a nice steady climb there. From 2003, it was just under $5 million. 2007 actual is $7.6 million, and I believe we're projecting around 7.8 for 2009. It looks like as a revenue stream, this funding source is maturing. We have opened up some additional tag offices out in the communities, and those didn't necessarily generate additional revenue. It was more of a convenience for the citizens not to have to drive to Tahlequah to purchase their tag. And when you start looking at the expenses related to motor vehicle tax, you'll see that some of the expenses have increased more than the revenues, and part of that is attributable to the field offices. Okay, this slide, it's a little bit busy. What I wanted to do was look at our sources and uses of revenue for the last few years actual. If you look at 2003, that was the first year I think that we had a big increase in our dividend from C&E. Our expenses were $8.7 million, and we had a surplus of $6.8. As you move across the years, you'll see the revenue, a dramatic increase from 2004 to 2005. A large part of that was the dividend from C&E. Another large part of it was a one-time contract support settlement that we got from the government of $8 million. And expenses also increased approximately $20 million. What we're heading into basically is that line between revenue and expenses is getting closer, and our surplus is going down. Not necessarily a bad thing, but what that tells me is we are getting to a mature point in our revenue stream, and we need to carefully review any new spending initiatives, review how we spend our carryover, ensure that we're not putting any of this surplus into recurring expenses. It's nice to have a surplus. One of the things that I was very happy to find out when I came to Cherokee Nation was that motor fuels tax, 25% of that goes into a reserve, and it is not to be touched until the end of that compact, and that is reserved for scholarships. A lot of our discretionary revenue is dependent upon a gaming compact with the state of Oklahoma. we might want to consider at some point in the future setting aside a part of that for the future, just like we did with motor fuels tax. If you'll go to the next slide, this is based on actual and budget. As I said, in 2007, our expenditures and our revenue were very close. We didn't have a large surplus. In 2008, we budgeted all that carryover, so you see that big spike in the budgeted uses, and revenue is not down, it's actually up from 2007 actual, but you don't have a big spike in revenue. And then 2009 revenues are actually projected to be a little bit less, and a lot of that is related to transfers in. That's the revenue line on this chart is actual revenues plus transfers in from other sources. So you see a big decrease in the budgeted carryover, and that a lot of that is based on the assumption that we're going to be spending some of that carryover in 08. When I looked at carryover for the general fund budget for this year, I looked at specific project-based budgets. We have included in our carryover things like the land acquisitions, what we're estimating that we won't spend in 08 to carry over to 09, the capital improvement reserve, $6.5 million, the contingency reserve, which we have not had to use in 08 thus far. We are requesting that again in 09, but we're using carryover funds to request that. For motor vehicle taxes, basically the carryover there is related to the allocation of prior year revenues. And then motor fuels tax, we have some carryover in there, but we've been working on a project to reconcile that funding source, and based on that reconciliation, we have an additional $2 million that we can bring into this budget, and I would be recommending that we add that to contract health. Some of our other budget assumptions going into this, salary increases. Each individual group budgeted 3% overall, and then we have requested 2% for the merit bonus pool. That would be paid out similar to prior year in lump sums, not in addition to salary. Indirect cost, we use the 2007 approved rate. At the time we were preparing the budgets, we didn't have the 08 rate yet, so the rate will go down slightly to 15.73. And based on where we're at with our expenses subject to indirect cost, I think the 09 rate will actually go down a little bit in addition, because we will have a full year of housing expenditures in our 09 budget, and we will have Hastings in the budget, which will increase our projected indirect cost collections. Our fringe rate should be fairly flat with 2008. That's what we've assumed in this budget. As I mentioned, the housing activities will have a full year impact in 2009. 2008, we had 5 months worth of activity in our budget. And WW Hastings operations assumed 10-108. New initiatives. There aren't a lot of new initiatives in this budget. As I mentioned earlier, the strategic work groups and the strategic budget committee work closely to try to determine the best use of the dollars for 09. The first item, community health leadership, that is funds to help generate working with the communities throughout the Cherokee Nation to impact the health status of Cherokee citizens. Experiential learning, that's an initiative to fund some historical and cultural projects, possibly some trips to Cherokee, North Carolina, and really involve some of our elders. School health leadership, that also is related to working with the schools to help introduce healthier foods, more physical activity, and that would be a pilot project through the health department. Tribal database, that is bare bones request to develop a database to track some of our self-help projects, and there's about a 4-phase project on that, and this initial phase is basically just developing the database. Excuse me. The community organization support, that is a request to fund some of the organizations in our communities and help them get going and get operational. Bridges Out of Poverty. This is a new initiative proposed by the Human Services Group. A lot of people are excited about this, and if it works, I think it's going to be an excellent means of helping people become self-sufficient. This pilot project will provide some subsidies to people who may be on general assistance currently, but they've gotten a job and they need a little bit of help getting until they get that first paycheck. So the first phase of it will be helping them with transportation, just basic need of being able to drive to work. This program will help with that. This bridge pilot project, this is another pilot to help with employment, and the purpose of that would be to assist the citizens with the continuation of their health insurance benefits. For example, if they were laid off at one position and there's a length of time before they get another position, rather than having them go without insurance, this would help continue their insurance benefits. Cherokee translators. This is a budget where we would do contracts with Cherokee speakers to assist in a lot of our translation efforts. There's been a real shortage of people who are qualified to translate documents for us and get them into the Cherokee language. So this would be to do some contracts in that area. Analysis of obstacles. This is to hire an outside contractor to conduct an in-depth analysis to identify the obstacles that some of our citizens have with going to work. The service team works daily with people out in the communities and can identify some of the obstacles, but probably can't document and understand all of the things that are out there that are preventing people from holding a job. And these funds would provide for an independent contractor who could do an in-depth analysis and provide a report back to the service team. The Strategy Enterprise Database. This is to provide funds to develop a database for the strategy department. It's basically a comprehensive tool to provide communication and decision-making information to the strategy department. Protect Your Cherokee Land, $25,000. That is a request for funds to work with people who still have restricted, individual restricted property, and help educate them on the benefits of retaining that restriction on their property. Comprehensive profiles for communities. This is the funds needed to begin developing profiles. We have a lot of different communities within the Cherokee Nation, and depending on the area, the type of community, there's different needs. So the purpose of this is to develop the means of tracking what are all the communities out there and what are their needs, what are their resources, and help manage the development of these communities. Juvenile Healing to Wellness Program, we have this listed as a new initiative. It's not really a new initiative. It is a continuation of the project that was started through the courts. It is being moved under Human Services to administer this program in 2009. And then the last item on here is unappropriated reserve. Basically, that was when we finalized the budget. That was our unappropriated surplus in the 08 budget. I know Doug put a comment in his overview regarding that. It's just a different philosophy of looking at it. Rather than submitting a budget with a surplus, show it as a reserve.
Yes, Stuart.
Why is Healing to Wellness program taken out of the court system and put under new initiatives?
That's why it is not really a new initiative. Human Services has been working with the court for the last several months. The court is still involved to a large degree, but they felt that Human Services could actually manage the program for them. In fact, Norma is here if you would like her to come up and give a little more information about that transfer.
Okay. Yes.
Well, I think the short version is that judges, because of the way that we employ our judges, they're basically in private practice and come over here once or twice a month to do to act as judges in our courts, and they really don't have time to operate programs. And I believe during the course of the grant process, that was one thing that came to light, and they were in agreement with that. So as the grant time ran out last December, Chad began to be in conversation with them about how we were going to go forward, because there was no funding for this program to continue, but it's something that administration certainly wanted to continue. So there was funds made available to kind of bridge that time between planning on what would happen. The chief pulled together several people from the tribal programs to have discussion about where it might most likely fit, because I have programs that do work with the court and work with juveniles in various situations. It was felt like that Human Services might be the best fit. So we have met with the judges. They're very, very supportive. Not much is really changing in terms of how it actually works. It's just that we'll have a more direct management with the staff, and I think we've already seen some positives from that. So maybe a little more structured than it was, and it's going very well with the judges. Judge Fight's very supportive, so is Justice Matlock. So. Okay.
Thank you, Norma.
This chart shows you the breakdown of our major funding sources for the 2009 requested budget. As you can see, our two largest funding sources are tribal, 24%, and that includes what we call Gen Fund. It includes motor fuels tax, motor vehicle tax. And then the second largest is IHS, and that would include bringing in the funding for Hastings. Go ahead. This is just a little historical chart that shows you the growth in our funding from 2002 to 2009. There's three major funding sources there where we've seen some significant growth. First of all is Cherokee Nation tribally generated funds, going from just over 25 million in 2002 to about 115 million. DOY self-governance, that's grown significantly. And then of course IHS, we've seen some significant growth there. Go ahead. This is our uses of funds. It's also a vision test for if you're like me, you can't read small numbers. This breaks down our budget, our requested budget, into the various groups. As you can see, services are the biggest part of the request. Health services is 39%, community services 14%, and on and so on and so on. But this is a nice visual that shows the largest part of our budget goes to services. Okay. This chart is what we refer to as our summary by funding source. It shows the sources on the left and the uses on the right, and the net reflects a balanced budget. One thing I would point out is on the enterprise funding source, it appears that there's a large surplus there. That's because of the Title VI, where there's still some subsidy coming in from NAHASDA, so it shows up there as a transfer in, but it's utilized to make the payments to the bank, so it's not from an enterprise accounting standpoint, it's not an actual expenditure. It is a use of funds, but it's not an expenditure, so there's not a huge surplus there. And then lastly, what I would like to go over is some proposed changes. When we prepare our budget and deliver it to council by July 31st, inevitably there are changes between then and the beginning of the budget hearings. The first item I spoke about a little bit when we talked about motor fuels tax is I would like to bring forward $2 million in additional carryover. I apologize. This slide is not in your booklet, and because it's a last minute one that I found wise this morning.
Can you get us a copy?
Yes, I can get you copies. The motor fuels tax carryover, I believe we should put that towards contract health. General fund, self-help water lines, they have not expended all of their funds in 08, so we're looking at adding another $200,000 to that budget, bringing it from $800,000 to $1 million to start in 2009, and that would be funded with carryover. General fund, one of the initiatives that we did not have in the original proposal was Cherokee Scholars Program, and I would propose that we reduce our unappropriated reserve to fund year one of this program, $70,000. Individual water and sanitation. When we did the budget, it appeared that they were not going to spend their 2008 allocation, so no funds had been requested for 2009. As we went through the year, because this is a project-based budget, they have indeed spent a lot of those funds, so we're going to request that we reduce the unappropriated reserve and add $500,000 for individual water and sanitation. The last item is for career services. Diane Kelly and her group do a lot of activities related to economic development, meeting with different groups out in the communities, and so this $50,000 would be a request to add a general fund budget to her group to support those types of activities. The total general fund adjustments would be $820,000. And that concludes my overview. We can either go into questions or...
Does anyone have any questions for Ms. Ketcher?
I will get you copies of this.
Yes, Ms. Jordan.
The economic development was to go to Diane Kelly?
Yes, for career services.
And we didn't have anything in for individual water and sanitation, but y'all are going to add 500 back in.
We're asking to add 500. And the reason it wasn't in there is it didn't appear that the program was spending their 08 allocation. So we were our plan would have been that after the year closed, bring that carryover into 09, but they have indeed picked up on that program and been able to use those funds.
Can I continue?
Yes.
I just want to make sure I understand what she's just added. The Cherokee Scholars Program is, now explain to me that, I'm pretty sure I know which program that is, but tell me again.
It is, actually, can you help me with that one? We've got so many.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Cherokee Scholars is a new initiative. We haven't yet funded it before, and in year one, what it would do is to partner with public schools, and what it is an incentive program to incent students to enter into higher level math and science courses in order to be more college ready. And those incentives are fairly small incentives. As you can see from the budget, it's only $70,000. The incentives range from tickets to the movies to a medal once they've completed the degree, the plan, their course plan, and so forth. And what you do is you also partner with local business, and we want to partner with employees here at the nation to provide speakers for the public schools, as well as private businesses to provide speakers and other donations for the public schools to provide matching funds for these incentives. There are some of the schools that don't currently provide the high-level courses like the physics courses that we would want them to provide as part of this program, and so part of the plan is if they lack say a physics course, is to purchase some of the lab equipment needed to provide that course, if they will provide the teacher for that course so they can start that course in their school and make that opportunity available to those students. So that's kind of an overview.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Are we creating a new position to operate the program?
That would be actually coordinated by the public schools outreach group, and Daniel Faddis is currently heading that up, and he'll just take that on as an additional project. So no additional staffing with this $70,000.
Speaking of.
On your individual water and sanitation, it's run out of money. And I know that because I tried to get some help with some people last year. So it went through the whole $500,000.
Yeah, I checked yesterday. I think they told me there were $3,800 left when I checked. So.
Why don't we put more into it?
Excuse me?
Why don't we put more into it?
Well,
Why didn't you put more if it's running out?
we're at the end of the year, and if they've got $3,800 left at the end of the fiscal year, then that's pretty good. Oh, yeah, and that's why we're requesting $500,000 for next year.
Is that not what we got last year?
Yeah.
I think it's 08.
08 was, right, it is level with 08.
Because I'd like to give more to it.
Back on one of those pages where you're talking about commissions and boards.
Yes.
And did I understand from that page that commissions and boards now make up 4% of our total budget?
Let me see. Can you flip back to that
It
uses?
was a little pie shape,
Right.
pie shape deal. Maybe the next to last page.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
That would be all of the commissions and boards rolled back together. That would be Gaming Commission, Tax Commission, EPC, Election Commission. Cherokee Phoenix also falls under that. So that would be all of those grouped back together.
Okay, could you, Callie, maybe this afternoon or whenever you can, break out how that, just the commission and boards?
Just the commission, sure.
How that breaks out in terms of money, because 4% of a 400 and, how 400 and some odd $1 million budget is a pretty big piece of.
Right. And that would be like, that would include approximately $7.5 million for motor vehicle, the $3 million tax commission, the,
If you could, I think it'd be easier to understand if you could just break that out.
I will break that out and give you a detail on that. Okay.
I think more than half of that's environmental protection.
Yeah.
Just look at that.
Sure.
I appreciate it.
Yeah.
Are there any other questions of Ms. Catcher?
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Evans, are you ready to present your overview?
Sure.
Yes.
Can you take about a 10-minute break and get our...
Okay. We'll take a 5-minute break. Come on, let's go.